Welcome to the Workology Podcast, a podcast for the disruptive workplace leader. Join host Jessica Miller-Merrell, founder of Workology.com, as she sits down and gets to the bottom of trends, tools, and case studies for the business leader, HR, and recruiting professional who is tired of the status quo. Now here's Jessica with this episode of Workology.
Welcome to the Workology Podcast, sponsored by ACE the HR Exam and Upscale HR. These are two of the courses that we offer here at Workology for certification prep and recertification for HR leaders. You can learn more about these at Workology.com. This podcast is part of a new series I'm calling HR Basics. I'm using air quotes here. HR Basics is where we cover common yet complicated topics within the world of human resources. And for the HR Basics series, I'm tapping into the HR consultant brain trust to help guide us in these very complex topics within the field of human resources. In every single episode of this series, we're talking to these HR consultants who support multiple clients and customers. They provide consulting, advising, and other support services for businesses of all sizes, shapes, and industries. In this specific episode, we're talking about employee investigations or workforce investigations. In the context of HR, employee investigations refer to the formal process undertaken by an organization to examine allegations or concerns related to things like employee behavior, workplace misconduct, or violations of company policies. These investigations are crucial for ensuring a fair and legally compliant work environment, addressing issues such as harassment, discrimination, theft, fraud, and other forms of misconduct. It sounds complicated because it is, and that's why many companies rely on HR consultants for outside support in the area of employee or workforce investigations. Before I introduce our guest for today, I do want to hear from you. Please comment podcast on my pinned Instagram post over at Workology blog. You can ask questions, leave comments, and make suggestions for future guests. I want to hear from you. Today, I am so honored to have Travis Johnson. He's an HR consultant and founder of Compass HR, or HR Compass. Travis calls himself an HR unprofessional with over 15 years of human resources experience, having worked in various positions across multiple industries. Why un? Well, most people will say that Travis is not your typical HR person. He's quite loud, energetic, and he likes helping people succeed. Who better to talk to about employee investigations than someone who might have a little fun with it? Travis, welcome to the Workology Podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Let's talk a little bit about your background and how you got into HR consulting.
Yeah, so I've been doing HR for over 15 years and kind of worked my way up there. Like you said, multiple industries across multiple organizations, ranging from 20 employees to 200,000, and anywhere from automotive industry to advertising to all sorts of stuff. So, what brought me into consulting was I was actually at the last company I was at. Before consulting, I actually got laid off, and due to reorging of the department. And so I thought it was a better time than ever to give it the old college try and hop into it. And I did it and went forward with it.
I love that. And I think a lot of maybe folks who are interested in moving to consulting can really relate to that. And that just because there's been a restructure, the reorg, doesn't mean that it's not an opportunity for you to invent yourself or reinvent yourself, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's talk about your approach to coaching and consulting in terms of how you work with business leaders.
Yeah, so the number one thing that I really kind of always try to, tell business leaders is, hey, I'm here to be a neutral third party. I'm not invested in your company per se. Like, I don't have like stake in it. I'm not an employee. I don't have the background of it. I just kind of come in as a third party and kind of help them where they need areas of improvement, or even take what they're doing great and even excel it even more. So I always try to come in with the approach of like, I'm your eyes and your ears, and I'm going to help you be better. It's something I kind of learned, especially being in the military in certain roles where it's like you're the eyes and the ears of the commander. So I'm the eyes and the ears of the business leaders. And then from there, I'm like, here's what you're doing great. Here's how we can be even better. Here's what you might want to, move your mark a little bit more and shoot again. So I always kind of take that approach. You know it as well, Jessica. Like I learned a long time ago, HR, especially when it comes to investigations, take things with a grain of salt, and not the gospel truth. So I always kind of take that as my approach, as well as I'm always just going to go in there just almost, naive, because then that helps me just kind of always have a neutral approach to everything.
I love that. And you just can't make assumptions when it comes to investigations. I mean, that's sometimes why the investigation is taking place in the first place. So having that neutral third party to come in and take a look and then investigate can help everyone maybe feel more comfortable coming into work and doing their job and supporting the business.
Agreed. Yes.
Well, let's get into employee investigations. I personally think this is one of the most foundational pieces of working in HR, but it's also one of the most complicated and intimidating ones. So talk to us about your approach when it comes to an employee investigation.
Being a consultant is always it's especially great for investigations because you are a third party. Even when you are HR and internally within an organization, people still don't always trust HR. So when you come in as that third party, it gives them a little bit more of a feeling of anonymousness. You come in there and they're like, okay, this person has nothing to do with their company. They're just here to, help out where they can. So that's always kind of the approach that I always take. Again, like even from the military, as an inspector general, I am a neutral party and fact finder. So that's how I take the same approach where I'm like, I'm here to find the facts and make the best decision and result because of those facts.
I think that's really important because especially if you're independent as a consultant, right? We come in without knowing the drama or the history or any of those things, or maybe preconceived like opinions or thoughts about certain people involved in the incident that's being investigated, which personally I think makes it just cleaner for everyone when we can bring in somebody from the outside, but that isn't always possible. So let's step back first, because I feel like sometimes, not maybe HR people, but maybe people are new to why we do investigations, right? So maybe walk us through some of the benefits of conducting a workplace investigation at all.
Yeah. When I think of investigations and, being HR, everyone always thinks like, oh, HR is just here to take care of the company and that's it. And then that's not always true. HR is there to represent everyone. Sometimes they might lean more towards the company because of the outcome. Sometimes it might be towards the employee. Doing an employee or an employment investigation is always important because you want to try to be as thorough as you can and be as neutral as you can be. I have definitely worked at in organizations or helped organizations that are like, oh, well, this is what I heard. Like, let's just fire the person. I'm like, okay, you're making an assumption or making an action or decision off of hearsay, which any lawyer will tell you, don't ever do that, And so I think the great thing about investigations is that it allows you to kind of paint a whole picture. And then from there, make your decisions on what you need to do, because you never want to do anything or reprimand someone or make any decisions off of hearsay, because a lot of times, let's face it, humans lie. They lie to protect themselves. I know that sounds completely a jaded HR person, but it is the truth. But it's like, I think doing investigations are important because you're able to paint the picture, see the whole picture, and from there, see what root causes is, what the down the path can be if you don't correct this action or make the right decision.
Well, to be fair, we've seen some shit working in HR. I mean, I was telling you before we got on, because you're in Kansas City. I used to live in Kansas City a million years ago, but I worked at Home Depot and we had a class action lawsuit that stemmed from, it was like 25 EEO claims that started at that store. It was a nightmare, and it was a lot of different factors, but really it started with one interaction that snowballed into something gigantic that was costing that company high six figures, if not seven figures, to defend. So I want people to understand that employee investigations are there for the company to understand what is happening and to have more of a neutral third party, which would be Travis in this case, to come in and kind of take a look, ask questions, try to determine if there is anything illegal or discriminatory that is happening. Because, and this is according to the EEOC, the average cost to settle an employment claim out of court is $75,000. Okay. And that's not including if it goes to trial. So you're looking at least $175,000, if not more money. So employee investigations help us to support our client to uncover just like the skeletons in the closet so we can help make a decision. Like, what is the best way to move forward with this, whether it was something egregious that occurred against the law, discrimination, whatever, because a failure to conduct a proper investigation can be a really expensive thing for an organization.
It can be. And the crazy thing too is a lot of the times when employees bring forward an investigation, they're not always looking for, monetary or I want to own the company. It's I felt slighted, I was slighted, I want to stop this. And I wanted to stop it from happening. And I want people to learn. Through investigations, I've learned like sometimes people are just like, I don't want to see someone lose their job. I just want you to train them better and get them to understand what they were doing and what they were saying was not okay. And that's the crazy part of it. It's like if you simply just take the time to invest in investigations, you can solve a lot of problems internally without having to go externally. When people go externally to like the EEOC, things like that, Dora, they do it because they don't feel like they're being heard or it's being addressed. And that's why they go that way. And then at the end of the day, they still are just like, I want things to change. That's it.
I think this is an important distinction for everyone to understand. And this is where I think people get what we do as HR people wrong. Like, yes, we are there to support the company, but every employee is there to support the company. Our job is just to conduct an investigation and then make a recommendation. It doesn't mean, unfortunately, that our word is gospel, that what we say is what the company is going to do. Even if we were an employment law attorney, which I'm not, it doesn't mean that they have to follow the recommendations of us or a attorney. They can do whatever they want, and then whatever the result is, they'll have to pay the consequences.
Exactly. That's a great thing, Jessica, is like getting people to understand, like, we will do our part, we will make our suggestions, what our observations are, what the penalties could be, but at the end of the day, our name's not, the company. It's like they do what they want. And it's still, as HR professionals during investigations, you have to make it clearly defined what your role is and why you are that way, because at the end of the day, if shit hits the fan and stuff does go legal, things like that, you put your stance on it and it can remove you as liability. So
yeah, I think that's an important point. Like, you also want to protect yourself as an individual too, or as an outside party that's a consultant who's coming in to do the thing. All right, let's take a little reset. This is Jessica Miller-Merrell, and you're listening to the Workology Podcast. It's powered by ACE the HR Examine, Upscale HR. We're talking with Travis Johnson, HR consultant and founder of HR Compass. So exciting. What a great topic and concept, talking about workplace investigations. You can comment podcast on my pinned Instagram post over on Workology blog to ask questions, leave comments, and make suggestions for future guests. I do want to hear from you. Let's go ahead and get back to my interview with Travis. Let's talk about employee investigations, where to start. So how do you decide where to start?
Yeah. So I guess it all kind of depends on, I've definitely worked in companies where internally we've had like an anonymous reporting line. And I've worked in companies where, they filled out a piece of paper and they turned it in to their HR person. Um, and so that's usually where a lot of it starts. I always encourage people, if you can't come up with a third party anonymous, reporting system, which some can be good, some can be bad, because sometimes when they are a third party anonymous system, it is really 100% anonymous, and it's like a lot of toggling back and forth. And I've definitely been out in locations where I'm like, hey, if you want to do this, file through that's on your own. Just know it might take a little bit longer because we literally have no idea who you are, and we are just going back and forth, back and forth. It's like someone's a messenger. But I think that's where it's kind of great to be like, as HR, really developing those relationships with your employees to where they have that trust in you and believe that you will do it. If you can't do a third party system, coming up with some sort of paper, or maybe, using Google Forms, things like that, is great, where people can do anonymous and it sends it in. And that's usually where I always encourage people to have some sort of system like that in play, because what it does is it allows the complainant to kind of give you a super detailed, sometimes how detailed they get, or a very generalized information. And then from there, you build out how you're going to ask questions. So I always suggest, when you're doing this, you want to start with the complainant, and then you interview them first. And then from there, you interview the complainant's witnesses, and then the accused, and then the accused witnesses. And that's why I always say have some sort of like jumping point for them to gather you information, because then it can allow you to structure questions for that investigation that will allow you to kind of get more specific answers. By all means, you don't want those answers to be, or those questions to be, misleading, or, putting the horse to the water, because then you're going to almost, it started, then it kind of makes the investigation void, because now you're getting them to almost give you answers that you want. So that's kind of how I started. And like I said, and then from there, of course, as you investigate, you might get, oh, this witness, and then you take the information down. And I've been doing this long enough, just like you have, to know where, like, as you do these questions, you have your outline structure, but learning, oh, well, they just said something. Like, from there, I need to, like, now ask this question, like, hey, you just said this, could you please, expound on that? And I think that's a great way to start. But having that basis for where people can give their complaint, because it is frustrating when, I'm not gonna say it's frustrating, it can be overwhelming when someone comes in and they're like, they sit down and like, I've got this complaint, and they just like have word vomit, and you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, let me get my bearing, structure everything. And then from there, it's just like, you're almost kind of, you're being very reactive as opposed to proactive, if they have a place for them to first air it, and then you can actually get into the nitty gritty.
I feel like employee investigations that are anonymous, while important, and you mentioned like an anonymous tip line or something, it is so challenging, because you'll get one and it'll be like, every person, it'll say that like cashiers are not paid enough, and women who are cashiers aren't being paid enough as the men. So then I get this anonymous report from the tip line, and I just know like a general, maybe region or basic information. So I conduct it, but I don't really have any more information to move forward. So if I knew that it was this location or something specific, like under this manager, I would have something to go on. So it's really hard when it's an anonymous, which I understand the need for an anonymity in a lot of these things. But it just makes it more challenging, and for me to follow up with that person, because there's a lot of follow-up questions that I would like to have, but I just have this report. They have to call back in at a certain time with the results of the said investigation. And then, that's kind of it. Like, unless they choose to come forward, there's not a whole lot more that I can do in terms of what I've gathered and found.
Oh yeah, 100%. As much as I understand the needs for anonymous reporting line, I'm not gonna lie, I loathe them, because it's just the same thing. Like, it's a lot of, speaking in generalities, and then like I have had used ones. It's literally like, you have to play telephone, And it's frustrating because then you have to wait for them to be able to make contact with that person. And then now you're getting back to it. And then, people are like, oh, why is this investigation taking so long? Because like there's too many people involved in it. And then it doesn't help. And it definitely creates a divide more between the employees, HR, and the company. And so it's always one of those things where I always like tell employees, just please reach out. I mean, I've given my cell phone out. I can't tell you how many organizations people have my cell phone number. And it's both a curse and a blessing because I'll get calls while I'm at dinner at a movie. But at the same time, too, it allows them to say, you know what, I have that like want direct line to them. And that's great. And I appreciate that. And it allows for us to build that rapport. And, you can always tell people, you want to remain anonymous? That's fine. We can make this complaint as ambiguous as possible. We can talk in such ambiguous terms that people won't be able to pinpoint it. And I think that's really where you have to build that rapport with people and get them to understand, like, yes, I am, here, but we can make you as anonymous as possible without having to use a third-party system that's just going to bog down the investigation and all that. But I agree, yeah, it can be very, very frustrating.
So tedious, and there's just so much context. I wanted to ask you about what you feel like is the most important factor when it comes to employee investigations or workplace investigations that we should be focusing on before everything else in your experience. Employee investigations are a critical function in HR, serving to uphold the integrity of the workplace, protect the organization from legal risks, and ensure that all employees are treated fairly. By following a structured and legally compliant process, HR professionals can effectively manage and resolve workplace issues, contributing to a positive and productive work environment. That's what we want, right? Are HR investigations, workplace investigations challenging? Are they easy? Yes, they are not easy. Absolutely, they are not. Having some insight into what an employee investigation or workplace investigation might look like can help us gain experience, which is why I appreciate Travis' insights on the podcast today. I believe it's our responsibility as HR experts to share what we know in the places and spaces like this one here. HR consulting is so much more than training. It's handholding, education, communicating, structured learning, advising, counseling. And I have learned so much from HR consultants in my own career. I appreciate Travis sharing his expertise and experience with us today on the podcast. Head on over and comment podcast on my pinned Instagram post at Workology blog. You can ask questions, leave comments, and make suggestions for future guests. I do want to hear from you. I really do. Feedback is a gift. And I want to thank you for joining the Workology Podcast, which is sponsored by Upskill HR and Ace the HR Exam. The full long hour podcast interview of the entire conversation with Travis Johnson on employee investigations is available exclusively for Upskill HR members. We have over 100 hours of personal and professional development in the form of webcasts, videos, podcast interviews like this one, all pre-approved for HRCI and SHRM recertification credits and PDCs. Visit upskillhr.com to learn more and sign up. This podcast is for the disruptive workplace leader who's tired of the status quo. My name is Jessica Miller-Merrell. Until next time, visit workology.com to listen to all our Workology podcast episodes. Have a great day.